You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Crypto Rundown. One final time here for the mad, insane year that has been 2021. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting network upon which so many of you are binging right now. Remember, if you're new to the network, if you just discovered this show and you're intrigued, maybe curious about the world of these crazy options things, and first off, wherever you get in the Crypto Rundown, make sure you upgrade, you subscribe to the full network. It's available on every platform under the sun. I don't care where the hell you want to get it. It could be Audible, smart speakers, YouTube. It's on all of them. As well as, of course, your Apple Podcasts, your Google Podcasts, your Spotifys, and everywhere else. Of course, if you want to get a little bit more education, for some of you who are newer to options and our educational programs like Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio will be good additions to this program for you, help you build up your options expertise. And of course, some of you want to leap to the deep side. If you're ready to dive into the deep end of the pool, you want to get live, get some great pro Q&As, including tomorrow. For the audience of this show, our buddy Mr. Simon Ho has been on the show multiple times. We'll be back in our pro Q&A hot seats. If you have a lot of great questions about crypto and volatility and perhaps the intersection therein, then you want to get over to the Secret Club and join up before tomorrow so you can get access to that pro Q&A. Should be a good one, as well as Options Oddities, the great giveaways. We just gave away a great December crate. Our listeners were saying they just received it. So that's always fun to see what's going to go out the door this month. You have to be in the Secret Club to get access to those as well. theoptionsinsider.com/secret club. Again, just me and you talking here. One final time for the mad year that was 2021. Let's get into it with the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's dive into our final episode for the year. And what better way to do that than by looking back on the mad, insane, tumultuous, tempestuous, pick your adjective. Chances are it probably applies, unless you pick quiet or tranquil. None of those apply. But the year that was 2021, it seems like a lifetime ago on the show listeners, when we were mocking that trader who came in to load up on the Jan 30,000 calls in Bitcoin back when Bitcoin was trading, around 10,000. Seemed like that was a bridge too far. It seemed like that was a ridiculous waste of money. And when we blew through that strike, we probably should have known that maybe a crazy year was afoot. And what a crazy year it was. Let's just look at some of the highlights and some of the lowlights. Let's go back a year ago to right now. Last year, December 27th. So the tail end of 2020, which was already a crazy year. Obviously, the pandemic kicked off. Volume was through the roof. Volatility had exploded. Many crazy things had happened. Bitcoin a year ago was trading 26,251. So it was already closing in and threatening that 30,000 strike. As I recall, I believe those calls were put on maybe around October timeframe of last year. So already by December, they were starting to look a lot better. And of course, we all know beginning of the year, what happened. Those calls took off. We blew through that strike. And well, we did look back, but not for a while. And that pretty much was already that day, actually, last year. The 27th was also pretty much the low we've hit for pretty much the last 365 days. We hit 25,789. We never got quite that low again throughout the mad year that was 2021. By the way, coming into today's show, we're back above the 50K handle, 51,453 to be precise when we kicked off the show. That's up quite a bit from last week's level of 46,488. And of course, we did hit some other levels in between there. The high for the year, the mad year, was threatening 70K listeners, 68,990 back on November 10th. So just what a tumultuous couple of months it's been. Q4. You can just take Q4 and do a case study on just that, how insane it has been. We've seen highs, we've seen lows, we've seen madness all over the place. So right now, we're still up sizably on the year. Pretty much a 2Xer from the nadir of December 27th of last year. Of course, entry year got higher and indeed lower. So an intriguing place to begin our look back episode here. Of course, coming into Showtime, Bitcoin vol, as it tends to do towards the end of the year, as most vol tends to do really coming into the end of the year, we're seeing it drift down a little bit. Right now, coming into Showtime, Bitcoin vol at about a 72. So that's actually pretty light, much lighter than it has been. We got into triple digits not too long ago and have threatened it a few times, but been generally drifting lower for the better part of the last few months. And we find ourselves coming into our final show of the year at a 72. It's hard sometimes to encapsulate and look at vol on a one-year basis. By the way, most of the analytics we're going to talk to you about today coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, a.k.a. gvol.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires out there when you're looking at all things crypto options analytics. So you want to talk SKEW, vol, OI, trading volume, what's going up out there, term structure, all that crazy stuff, and a whole bunch more. You can literally spend hours just sorting through the various analytics they have over there at gvol.io, the place to go to begin your journey in the crypto space. You can look at these numbers over the course of the past year from a lot of different ways. And sometimes it's challenging to look at it from an overall vol level. So we thought a good way to do it actually is through one of the new creations of our buddy, Mr. Simon Ho, is going to be joining us on the crypto hot seat, not the crypto hot seat, the pro Q&A hot seat. Probably going to be very crypto heavy tomorrow. So again, a good reason for you folks to join us if you haven't already joined the secret club there. But looking at his BitVol creation, which is of course his analog for a Bitcoin VIX. It's the closest we have right now to a Bitcoin VIX. Looking at that over the past year and see how it's ebbed and flowed, get some highs and lows from there. And the high for the year of the Bitcoin VIX, aka BitVol, was actually very early in the year. Remember, we had that explosion in January. January was an insane month for a lot of reasons. In many ways, we kicked off the year at the apex of insanity. I don't know if we ever quite reached those lofty levels of insanity again that we saw in January, not just from the broad spectrum of what was happening down in Washington and everything else, but from a market's perspective, Bitcoin was exploding. We saw the meme stock phenomenon really kick off with GameStop in January. It's kind of hard to match the madness that was January throughout the rest of the year. We're going to endeavor to do that throughout this week on the network and come up with some other interesting highlights from all the various market segments that we talk about here. But January, probably going to hold a special place, or perhaps a highly cursed place in everyone's hearts, depending on how you view that insane month. But that was also the apex for BitVol, aka Bitcoin VIX, 166.62, which it hit on January 16th. That was coming pretty much right near that high that it hit early in that first wave of the run-up there in January. Remember, it rallied high and hard into early to mid-January and took a bit of a breather. And that's pretty much right where we saw the high for the BitVol. The low came a few months later on April 30th of 75.27. Remember, that was kind of the April to May timeframe was really where we saw that protracted sell-off out there in BitVol, or I should say Bitcoin, and most of the major crypto products. And if you're wondering, where do we stack up right now on that list? We're actually not that far off the low for the year. Coming into showtime, we're at about an 81.51. So 6 points roughly away from the low for the year. So that's something to keep in mind out there as you're watching Bitcoin vol drift into this seasonally low part of the year. Is it going to hang out here for longer? We'll take another shift into higher gear as the new year kicks off. That'll be interesting to see. By the way, if you're wondering what day of the week has exhibited the most realized volatility out there over the course of the year, which day should you really maybe be paying attention? Maybe keep your powder dry if you're a vol seller out there. Well, the folks at GVol have crunched the numbers, and it's Saturday, which may come as a surprise to a lot of you out there who are used to the traditional market hours. You're used to your Monday to Friday trading. Maybe if you trade some futures and futures options, you get some more hours within there. But most of you are used to that Monday to Friday open to close period. You don't expect Saturday to be a big vol day because it's not. Literally can't be for most of the products that you trade. But in crypto, it is, of course, 24/7. And Saturday is where we've seen the most bang for your vol buck. It is roughly 1.5 times more volatile than the next closest day, which was Friday. So you're talking about Saturday, pretty big day. So if you're out there trading crypto, maybe you need to know which days you should be concerned about, which days maybe you keep your powder dry. If you're selling vol, if you're buying vol, where you can get your most bang for your buck. It is Saturday. Interesting data point that kind of surprised me, and I thought it might surprise you as well. Let's look back also as well over the year from a SKEW perspective. That's another thing that's kind of challenging to do sometimes, listeners, because how do you really keep SKEW constant throughout the year to measure? You have to look at it from a constant maturity perspective. We ended up crunching the numbers and looking at it from an overall, your constant maturity SKEW throughout the year. So you're looking at your heights of your call volume in your 25 roughly delta range, and the heights of your put volume in your roughly 25 delta range. And you're going to see where the highest levels are, where the calls most outdistance the puts, and where the puts had their best showing, let's say. And if you look at it from that perspective, the high for the year for the upside, so when the calls had the most premium from a vol perspective over the puts, that was about that same time frame where we saw the high for BitVol was on Jan 16th. The high for SKEW premium for the year was on January 15th. That was right when Bitcoin was at about 36,760. It had just come off its run to about 41,000, and it was dropping off. So the high for the year from a call perspective, where the most call vol was exhibited out there, call premium over puts, that put it at about a positive 57 vol points over the puts. That's how much all the action was in the calls. That was on January 15th. The flip side of that came on May 30th, when we saw the most put action. That's when the low for the year was about a negative 32. So we saw the most premium to the puts versus the calls. And that was, again, on May 30th. Bitcoin, similar price level, about 35,645, but that is right hot off the heels of its big sell-off from about 59,000 listeners. So 59,000 sold off to around the 35,000 level, and that's when we saw that big bid for the puts. And if you listen to the show over the course of the past year, you know I've said a few times, it takes a bit of an aggressive sell-off to really get the puts kicking into high gear in Bitcoin. And that's exactly what we saw back on May 30th. Intriguing stuff out there. If you're wondering how the SKEW that Simon cooked up and announced recently on the show, how that has fared over the course of this past year, because they're measuring that SKEW on a rolling basis throughout the year, it hit a high of 94.04. That was recently. That was on December 6th. And a low of 56.56. That was on November 25th, as you'll recall, listeners. That was coming out of the Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S., heading into Black Friday Omicron was on everyone's lips and the market was selling off pretty hard. So interesting stuff. Again, the bit skew is kind of new, so take some of those ranges with a bit of a grain of salt. We need a few more months under our belt to really have a good sense for the highs. We don't even have a full year really of bit skew yet, but intriguing nonetheless. Let's go on out. By the way, if you're wondering what was the day, some people like put call ratios. I've never been a huge fan of those, but if you are so inclined, the day with the highest put call ratio out there, so where puts were trading the most over calls out there, that was on April 17th, 0.71. That's very high for Bitcoin, obviously. Obviously, it's usually very call heavy. The put to call ratio, so the ratio of puts to calls, is usually very low. Getting up to a 0.71, that's fairly high. And again, April 17th was the highest day for that. If you're wondering, in terms of volume, what were the biggest volume days for Bitcoin options out there? And I went and I kind of eschewed the notional volume days. You know, I hate notional. I don't really care about notional. There's a lot of ways you can game those numbers. Contracts tell me a lot more about what's actually trading out there. The largest contract volume day, again, going back to what I said earlier about how January was kind of the apex for insanity for the year. The biggest volume day on Deribit from a Bitcoin options perspective was January 11th. We saw 43,000 contracts going up that day. Genesis breaks it down into block and non-block. So kind of your retail and type of things you folks will be doing out there. The blocks are obviously going to be the larger institutional prints. 43,000 going up in non-block retail type trades and another 18,000 in large block trades. So a pretty active day, 61,000 contracts overall. If you're wondering the flip side of that, what was the nadir for volume? It was back in the midsummer period where not a lot was going on. July 11th, 2,900 contracts going up. So quite a difference by comparison. Let's get out to the open interest, see what's going on right now. Coming into the end of the show, and remember, we just had Greg from Genesis on not too long ago, and he was talking about that looming cliff out there in Bitcoin options that we're all going to fall off together once the year rolls off the board. This is a huge, roughly 50% of the OI is going to go the way of the dodo. I'm hard-pressed to think of another asset class in a similar situation. What does that mean for Bitcoin going forward? Where will the new OI establish itself? Will it be along these same lines? Will it be something entirely different? We shall find out starting in about a week on our next show. But coming into this last show of the year, the call OI on Deribit is about 153,000 contracts, up about 11,000. So once again, calls remaining in the catbird seat. The puts are below 2-1 now. Calls gaining some OI. Puts actually losing OI, losing nearly 2,000 contracts down to about 64,300. So well below the 2-1 level we'd like to look at out there. In terms of the action from a month perspective, like I said, it's all December all the time. DECE is up to about 115,000 contracts right now. It's up 3,000 from this time last week. March has ticked up a little bit. It's up to about 28,600. It's up about 1,400 from this time last week, and there's nothing else really to speak of. So when we come back together next week, we're going to be talking about March. It's not going to be a lot to talk about. So it should be interesting. By the way, if you're also wondering, before we get to that, let's get to the strikes, and we'll get to that extra nugget I was just mentioning there. Let's look at the open interest. Where are the size strikes? Where are the big positions in Bitcoin options to wrap up the year here? Number 5, let's go from the bottom here, is the 50,000 strike, a newcomer to our top 5 here. Usually it's been 60,000 or something else. This week it's 50K at the bottom of our list with 9,500 contracts open. Again, that's a newcomer, so we don't have a change from last week. Number 4 is kind of a tie with 3 and 4 are a tie. Once again, we have the 80,000 strike and the 120,000 strike, both at 11,000 contracts, both unchanged this week. So not a lot of action going up there, but both of them kind of holding down the 3/4 spot, however you want to look at it. Number 2 is the 70,000 strike with 12,000 contracts open. It's up about 2,400 from this time last week. And number 1, the big dog, is the par strike, still the 16,000 strike. That's up about 1,000 from this time last week. If you're wondering also which strike has had the biggest change in OI over the course of the past year, how much of the volume has gone up on this strike, how much has the open interest change over the course of the past year? Well, it's the par strike. It's the 100,000 strike. That OI has changed by over 8,500 contracts over the course of the past year since what it was pretty anemic about a year ago. Again, will that persist once that rolls off the board in December? a lot of that's going to go away, obviously. There's some open probably in March, but nowhere near 16,000 contracts. Is that going to persist, or will there be a new top strike leading our list this time next week? That'll be interesting to watch out there. Again, the notional value of that OI, take it with a bit of a grain of salt, but it has ticked up a little bit. No doubt due in part to the fact that Bitcoin has ticked up over the course of the past week. It was about 10 billion worth of OI open on Deribit last week, 11 billion this week. Let's see where our other secondary outlets line up, see who's going to end the year in the catbird seat. And it's actually CME taking the number 2 spot right now. 373 million worth of OI open out there, followed by Ledger X. For the last month or two, it's really been a fight between Ledger X and CME, but CME taking it right now. Ledger X number 3, 322 million. Then number 4, Bit.com, 252 million. And rounding out our top 5 venues for Bitcoin options is OKEX with 231 million. Let's look at the volume level. We actually had some decent numbers over the course of the past week. In particular, Bitcoin loves a weekend and Bitcoin loves holidays, apparently. They don't take a break for anybody, because the busiest day we've seen in quite some time was actually on Christmas Eve, December 24th. We did 1.1 billion worth of notional volume out there. Again, that kind of blew the doors off the rest of the week. And again, goes to show, no holiday, no weekend will slow down Bitcoin when it's getting its groove on out there. Speaking of getting their groove on, CME kind of got their groove on this year from a crypto perspective. They had a lot of milestones this year. In particular, it's interesting to talk about those now because it's hard to believe, but it was 4 years ago, listeners. 4 years. It was December of 2017 when they launched their Bitcoin futures and really kind of kicked off this whole race into the crypto derivatives that we've been chronicling for a while here now on the Crypto Rundown. Obviously, Bitcoin, others have been around for much longer than that, but from a derivatives perspective, people really look at that as the beginning of kind of this modern marketplace we're seeing evolve. There are obviously perpetuals and other things open on various venues for a while, but the launch of the derivatives was the big watershed moment. Of course, some regretted it because it kicked off the crypto winter. You could finally sell Bitcoin. Prior to that, it was a bit of a roach motel. You could get in, but you could not get out. But getting beyond that milestone of 4 years ago, looking into this year, there were a few milestones, mostly new product launches, including ETH futures kicking off back in February of this year. And then micro Bitcoin futures, which have been very active, those kicked off in May of this past year. And of course, we all know just a few weeks ago, micro ETH. So it didn't take long from February to December. That's probably their fastest turnaround yet for launching of a micro on a big future over there at CME, launching the big Ether futures in February and the micro in December. Now, let's keep on rolling then. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show where we go beyond the big dog that is Bitcoin. Let me caution you now as we run down the year that has been in some of these altcoin. Some of these prices may bring a bit of a tear to your eye. So you are forewarned here. Let's get into it now. Let's start with the big dog in the altcoin universe, which is ETH. Coming into today's show, back over the 4K level, 4,087 to be precise. That's a decent pop from last week's level of 3,864. So you're talking about 223, 224 handles out there. Not bad. But again, like I said, some of these prices from last year are going to make you wince a little bit. ETH closing price on this date 1 year ago, December 27th, 683.03. So it's had a nice little run, let's say, over the course of this past year. It hit its high for the year back in early November. That was 48.65. And again, the low I just mentioned was a year ago on our same show. That same show where it closed at 683, it hit a low of 625. That was a pretty wild day, December 27th of last year. So net over the past year, a low of 625 and a high of 48.65. My goodness. Quite the rally in all things ETH. Hopefully you got in on some of that over the course of the past year. Yeah, that's been interesting. I remember in particular when we hit that new all-time high of 1,700 earlier in this past year. That's when it really seemed like for a lot of people that was an inflection point for a lot of you saying, you know, I got to get in on this ETH train. I missed it at maybe 400. I missed it certainly at 600. And when it broke through 1,700, it seemed like it really had some legs, and that's when people really started diving in. But hopefully you got some back in your account, maybe pre-600. If so, good on all of you out there. Vol-wise, been a interesting tale out there as well. We hit the high for the year. Remember, ETH vol is always bid over Bitcoin vol anyway, so it's usually structurally more volatile. And the high was higher out here. The ETH vol, again, same index using the same methodology, going to Simon's ETH VIX this time instead of Bitcoin VIX, which is a nice continuously updated rolling kind of 30-day implied vol measure. It hit its high, unlike Bitcoin, which topped out in January 16th. Bitcoin, or I should say ETH vol, hit its high on May 19th, hit a 218 on the ETH vol index. It hit its low actually the month before, April 17th, 84.42. That's quite the pop in vol from April 17th to May 19th. Of course, that was that period of an aggressive sell-off out there in the major crypto assets. So a lot of action out there on the vol front. Speaking of vol, coming into today's show, we're seeing ETH vol continue to trend lower, just like we have been seeing a Bitcoin vol for some time now. Coming into today's show was at an 81%. That is about 11 points below where it was this time last week. We had about a 92% on the show this time last week. So again, getting well below the triple-digit level. SKEW-wise was about a negative 2.3 on last show and about a 1.3 on this show. Let's go out really quickly back to the land of T3 and see if we could find, because they do actually run an ETH SKEW index as well. We don't talk about it all too often out there because it is a little esoteric for many of you out there, but they do, in addition to BitSKEW, they do offer an ETH SKEW. Let's look at some highs and lows out there really quickly as well. The low for ETH SKEW was 67.96. That was back on November 26th. Again, that was the Friday. That was the Omicron big sell-off. Just about every asset class was getting into high gear, into the red. Not surprising, perhaps, that we'd see a big bid to the puts out there in ETH SKEW. In terms of highs, looks like it hit the mid-90s a few times. 95.59 on September 23rd. And also, to kick the year off, 95.62 on January 3rd. So, again, like I said, January may have been the apex of craziness. So 95.59 on September 23rd, and just managing to edge it out, 95.62 on January 3rd. So that's your apex for SKEW in January, even though we did revisit it. Looks like a few times here, got into the low 90s multiple times with ETH. So obviously ETH, like Bitcoin, very call heavy. Those very highly positive numbers reflect a lot of interest in the calls. And intriguing stuff here. January 3rd, didn't take long for that call SKEW to kick off. Let's look at the OI right now as we wind down the year in ETH. Coming into showtime, 1.34 million contracts open on the call front. It's up a whopping 90,000 from this time last week. The puts taking a bit of a break, 472,000 contracts open. That's down 1,000 from this time last week. So intriguing stuff. Again, as we've seen ETH continue to rally a little bit over the last week, all the action has been in the calls. And once again, like in Bitcoin, we do have this looming cliff. It's not quite as bad in ETH as it is in Bitcoin because the quarterlies have been pretty active for a while. So there is a decent amount of OI in March, but still, it's not exactly the level perhaps you may have thought or perhaps been hoping for. Speaking of levels, let's go really quickly. Let's look at the SKEW from another perspective. Let's go crunch the numbers, make constant maturity SKEW perspective, and see how that looks. Again, going back to what we did with Bitcoin, looking at the net 25 delta call premium when it was the most elevated over the puts and vice versa. And the calls had their high, similar level here, January 15th. So around the same date as Bitcoin, hit about a high of 45. So 45 vol point premium to the calls over the puts. And the puts took their moment in the sun, not actually in November, but in May 22nd, again, back in the teeth of that big sell-off we saw across the board in crypto. The puts got up to a negative 54. So 54-point premium there over what the calls were trading at as everyone was piling into the puts. So intriguing swings there from January to May. Let's go on out now, look at some of the other highs. Let's look at the volume. The busiest trading day for the year on Deribit from an ETH options perspective. That came on May 3rd. An interesting day. You might have thought it would have been January or maybe a little bit later in May into really the teeth of that sell-off. But May 3rd, 348,000 contracts on the table. It's nothing to sneeze at. That's in the non-block kind of retail mom and pop smaller trades. And then the big block trades did another 66,000 contracts that day. So a pretty active day, well over 400,000 contracts. The low, the flip side of that, again, late summer, August 21st this time, 22,000 contracts going up that day. So quite a disparity there. Let's go on out to the months. Let's see exactly how much paper is going to roll off the board this week in December in ETH. And it's a lot. DEES right now, 870,000 contracts open. That's up nearly 100,000. So up 95,000 contracts from this time last week. So folks, continue to pile into December with less than a week to go now. Intriguing. March number 2, 395,000 contracts. It's up barely. It's up about 5,000 contracts. So closing in on 400K, still less than half of what's open in December. And again, everything else kind of falls off the board. So be interesting to see how things shape up in March. I do expect March to be the big dog for some time. Again, people in ETH, they just love the quarterlies for whatever reason. That's been the case for as long as we've been watching this product. Let's look at the top strikes. How is ETH going to end the year? What are the big dog, the big positions out there in ETH options? Let's go from the bottom again. Number 5 is the 8,000 strike. 72,000 contracts open there. It's up slightly about 1,000 contracts from this time last week. Number 4 is the 6,000 strike with 99,000 contracts open. It's up about 9,000. So a big jump there between 5 and 4. Number 3, the 5,000 strike. It has 101,000 contracts open. It's up about 3,000 from this time last week. Number 2, the 15K strike with 120,000 contracts open. It's up about 1,000. And number 1, yet again, the 10K strike. 121,000 contracts open on that strike, up about 3,000. I didn't run the numbers, but I'm sure if we looked at the strike with the most open interest change over the course of the past year, I'm guessing the 10K strike would probably be in the catbird seat as well. And I mentioned this is going to be painful, listeners. Let's do a quick run through of some of the other altcoin, what kind of year they've had. Let's go out to XRP first. This has been a challenging year, I think, to put it mildly, for XRP, just because most of you had no access to it. So it kind of sucks to have a major crypto that I know a lot of you are interested in that has persisted in the top 10 of market cap throughout the year, despite the fact that most of you can't touch it, at least here in the U.S. On our show at the end of last year, December 27th, XRP was at a whopping 28.2 cents. And last week it was 85 cents. Coming into today's show, nice little lift, 94 cents. So nice rally out there in XRP, up about 66 cents over the course of the past year. So nice run. Unfortunately, again, you couldn't touch it. Let's go to the Doge. Let's go to the Doge. It was 16.6 cents last week, 19.1. Nice little lift in Doge this week. It ended last year 0.0045. Oh my goodness, up nearly 19 cents on the year. That's a good run and quite the percentage move in Doge as well. Litecoin. Let's get out to Litecoin. And obviously you had the headlines that was the big pump and dump. So that got a lot of people back fixating on Litecoin. Litecoin a year ago, 127.62. Coming into last week, 150 and about a quarter. Today's show, 159.71. So it's had the nice run, about 32 points. But again, percentage-wise, nowhere near what we've seen in some of these other altcoins that have had hundreds, if not thousands of percent increases over the course of the past year. Like Cardano, for example. It was $1.23 in our last show. It's had a nice run just to this week, up to 155. That's a nice jump. That's a nice 32-cent jump. But if you go back to our show at the end of last year, Cardano was trading a whopping 15 cents. So you're talking nearly a 1,000, about 950% increase over the course of the past year. Listen, so again, I warned you, some of these are going to be painful. That one certainly is, especially given the pop it's had over the course of the past week, looking much better to end the year. What do we have here? Polkadot. Another one's going to hurt, listeners. It was $23 on our last show. Nice pop this week, $32.13 this week. A year ago, $5.14. So up a whopping, 27. Talking more than 5x on the, these are painful. I warned you at the top of the show. Some of these are going to hurt. This one's really going to hurt, this next one. Solana. We've been talking for a little while now, just how insane just the last few months have been in Solana. If you go back a full year, that puts that insanity in some context. Solana on our last show, 175.06. Today's show just passed the 200 level again, 200.5. So a nice pop, about $25 over the course of the past week. Going back a full year, Solana closed on the 27th of last year, $1.30, listeners. So it's up a whopping almost 200 handles. I won't even put that in percentage terms. It's too painful for many of you out there, listeners. But yeah, this is analogous to going back after the .com bust. This is the reverse of that, and looking at some of the documentaries they did, like startup.com and others, and seeing the ticker going by and seeing some of the prices that those tech names were trading at the end of the 90s into the .com bust, and then looking at those prices, let's say a year later, and it was the opposite. They had all been annihilated. Here we have the inverse of that, all these products looking strongly higher from where they were a year ago. Let's get out to Shiba. I won't even insult you with that one, listeners, because that one obviously has had a crazy trajectory over the course of the past year out there. I won't insult you by going further into all things Shiba. Spoiler alert, though, it is higher. Let's go really quickly. Before we roll out of here, we had a fun year in the hot seat. Let's break down some of those fun memories as well.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody. Let's look back at the year that's been on this venerable program. Our hot seat here, our little old hot seat on the Crypto Rundown, has had some great butts rolling on through it over the course of the past year. We kicked off the hot seat a year ago with our buddy, Mr. Simon Ho. He's always got some crazy new products, new crypto vol indices and things he's looking to calculate and launch and disseminate. So we kicked off the year with him, and our buddy, Mr. Bill, came on in February, as well as Greg from Genesis Volatility, also in February. March, we went out to Osprey Funds with Greg King, as well as Gerald David from Arca. Simon also made another appearance there in March. And we wrapped up that month with Kevin Beardsley from Kraken. You guys like to hear from the different venues and exchanges out there. We endeavor to bring them on the show for you. April, we got back to our old buddy, Mr. Koppel Rothi from Cross Tower, as well as Rafaela Beraldo from Pods, and Zach Dexter, one of the co-founders of LedgerX. Now, of course, parts of that larger empire out there. It'll be interesting to see what the future holds in store for LedgerX. May, we were joined by Nate Cox from 2 Prime and Mr. Bill, once again holding court on the sell-off we were pretty much in the midst of. We're about to see really there in the crypto markets. June, we were joined by Travis Schwab from Aventus and Michelle Bond from the Association for Digital Asset Markets, aka ADAM. They had a 2-day conference they were putting together there and wanted to tell you folks about it. Simon and Greg also joined us again in June, as well as Rain Steinberg, the CEO of Arca. So a twofer from Arca over the course of the past year. July, we had Brian from Digital Asset Investment Management, DAIM, D-A-A-I-M, joining us on the show, as well as Eric Kovalak from Vellum Capital. August, joined by Giles Colwell from BlockFi, Mr. Bill, and Robert Materazzi, the CEO of Luca, as well as Mr. Greg over there from Genesis. September, we were joined by Juthika Chow, formerly of LedgerX, now holding court over there at Kraken. October, we had Rumi Morales, formerly of CME Ventures, now out there doing her own thing, including on the podcast front, as well as Eric Kovalak back for his second appearance from Vellum Capital, and Mr. Simon. I think that's when he launched the BitSkew on our show. November 1st, we had Frank Caberna from the Small Exchange, as well as Simeon Hyman from ProShares, again, talking about the launch of Bitto. Haven't even mentioned that yet on the show. November 15th, we had John Pearlstone from Crypto Patterns. Our old buddy, the once and future Dr. Vix, Mr. Russell Rhodes, joined us on November 22nd. And then back this month, we've had our buddy, Mr. Greg, to wind down the year from Genesis, as well as Rob Fresca, just recently on the show, from Cosmo Ventures. Hope you folks have enjoyed the slew of guests, quite the wide variety of guests we've had in the crypto house. Not all derivatives all the time. We endeavor to bring a lot of derivatives folks on, but we like to pick the brains of a wide variety of people out there in the crypto markets. All right. That music means we've come to the end of our year in review episode of the Crypto Rundown. It also means we've come to the end of another year in the Crypto Rundown. I want to thank all of you out there who've joined us whenever you started listening to us. If you joined us all the way back in episode 1, we love you. If you joined us last week, you're new to this whole crypto thing, you want to see what it's all about, welcome to all of you as well. You folks are quite literally the reason we do this show, and it's been fantastic and really enjoyable for us here on the network as well. It's opened the doors to a lot of new guests that we wouldn't traditionally have on other programs, and also to a lot of new listeners who maybe wouldn't otherwise have discovered an options-oriented podcast network if it wasn't for this program. So we love all of you. We love seeing what the crypto market has brought for a lot of you out here in terms of trading opportunities, in terms of volatility and volume and liquidity. We only expect those things to grow over the coming year. What will be the hot altcoin? Will we hopefully have maybe some more options to trade on these altcoins? That would be nice. And a lot of other fun things. Are there some guests you folks would love to see us have in the hot seat? Hit us up. Let us know. We love to hear from you folks. You, again, are the reason that we do this show week after week. And never fear, we'll be back next week to kick off a new year with another new episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll see you then.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.